Akarana stuff. Uh, Wages, um, high-paying jobs, uh, free market enterprise, federal mandates. I'm not an economist. I did study some economics in college, but I've also worked for the man for a long time. And I wages. I think everybody understands how that comes about, but I thought I would try to put my 2 cents into it. How okay? You're either in if you work for a living, you're either in manufacturing or you're in services. I include all sorts of management and administrative and all that stuff in the services category, rightly or wrongly. Manufacturing or services. Um, in a free market enterprise, companies who are in the business for a profit will try to make a product, manufacture a product, or they provide a service. The service can be repairs, service can be hotels, anything like that. Manufacturing from coat hangers to toilet paper, anything, aircraft, anything manufacturing. Okay, these companies who are in the business to manufacture or provide services are doing so for a profit. So, whatever all of their costs associated with providing that service or making that product, since it's a free enterprise system, they have to compete with other companies who make similar or identical, like cars. They have to compete against other companies that are doing the same thing, hotel chains, automobiles, uh, anything and everything, refrigerators, all that stuff. Okay, so they need workers. All right, they need workers, and depending on the level of skills required for the job they want to fill, there may be a lot of people or very few people. Uh, if there are a lot of people available for a specific job, then the company in a free market enterprise will always attempt to pay those workers the smallest amount they can. And they need to do that to keep their retail or their wholesale product costs for whatever product or service they're providing as competitive or as comparable to other companies' product or service costing. Again, they're in it for profit. So their goal is to try to hire people at the lowest amount per hour uh, that have the skills to do the job that they need doing. Okay. So you as a worker, uh, if you want a higher paying job, you need a higher set of skills, a broader set of skills, or a unique set of skills. For example, a machinist, someone who can play with metal and make and fabricate and make metal parts, those are highly skilled people. There's not that many can do it. So when a company needs those people, there are very few around and they have to pay a higher wage. If, on the other hand, you're looking for a restaurant server, cocktail waitress, whatever, the skill set there is pretty well. You got to be a human, really. You have to have some human contact, be a reasonably likable person or such. But they can hire, there's a lot of people that can do that or think they can do that. And so minimum wage for the service industry, especially in restaurants and so on, is very minimal, and that's where tips come in. Limited skill sets. There are jobs available for limited skill sets, but they're not going to pay a whole lot. Okay, I mean it. There's a lot of people can do it, so companies are always going to attempt to hire at the smallest amount per hour that they can. Okay, that's just a given. That's part of the free market enterprise where companies are in the business to make a profit and they have to compete with other companies and they have to price in the cost of their labor. Okay, higher paying jobs, depending on skill sets. College graduates, for example, make more over their lifetime, significant amount of more over their lifetime than a high school graduate. Why? Because they don't necessarily have a specific skill set. You don't come out of college, even I don't care what kind of degree you have. All that's done is prove that you can learn and master a new set of skill sets. So that is, there are fewer of those people, and therefore an employer has to pay a higher wage for that higher paying job. Okay. Um, there's the government's always touting this new program is going to create a lot of new high paying jobs. Well, the only way that's so is if you have skilled labor that have the skills that are required for that new high paying job. Certainly, in some cases, they will train you, and there are training programs. And around here, there's a naval shipbuilding yard, and they do advertise that they can, will take in unskilled labor, and through a training program they offer, they can get you up to a qualified skill set, and you can make more money. I mean, the other aspect of wages, besides the free market enterprise and a company trying to hire you at the lowest amount they can, is labor unions. And I'm not against labor unions. They had their place. They have their place. That's where all the members of a union can say, look, we need this kind of wage, and they have a contract with the company that's providing the service or the product, and they have strength in numbers. You have to be in the union to work for that company or that service provider, and so they can demand a higher wage. It's not strictly based on the skill set. Getting into a union can be difficult uh, if you don't have any skill sets, but nonetheless, unions, and there are a lot of American corporations that have very strong unions, and those jobs command higher wages. There was a recent railroad um, worker strike or threatened strike, and the unions demanded a certain amount of pay increase, and they demanded, other things, health benefits and all that, and the companies balked at it, and it finally had to be settled by the federal government. Congress had to initiate a federal government had to initiate a settlement on forced an agreement between the railroads and the workers. High-paying jobs, skill sets. If you're a high school graduate and that's as far as you go, then there are all sorts of trades. Electricians can make decent, high-paying job. Plumbers can make HVAC people but you need some training. Truck drivers, you can go to truck driving school. They can make decent money. You have to, though, start acquiring skill sets. And the more skill sets you have, the higher the wage will have to be paid by a company or service. There aren't that many people. It's a supply and demand sort of thing on labor. Supply and demand is sort of a fundamental of a free market enterprise. Uh, Companies have to compete for labor, and they have to compete for the labor with the skill sets that they need. Okay. So the only way, if you want to get more money, you want to get higher wages, you want to get in a better position, you have to start adding to your skill sets. Sometimes you can do that in the company. There's a position open. They will train you for that, and you need to do that. Um, if there are all sorts of online courses now for this and that, you can apprentice with electricians, you can apprentice in HVAC, all sorts of things like that. And if you are interested in that area, then you should start making an effort to do something about it to get a higher paying job. Okay, there's no way around that. Uh, to some degree, it's a function of the area you live in. If you live in a rural area, there are probably limited number of jobs there, and they may be very high skill jobs, or they may be very, very low skill set required jobs. So the number of high paying jobs in a particular area is a function of what sort of companies and so on are there and the labor available in that area. So around metropolitan areas, you have lots and lots of companies, and chances of jobs are more readily available at all skill set levels. A lot of people don't want to move, but sometimes the economics, everything dries up around where you are. Sometimes there were manufacturing plants out in the Midwest and small towns and other places. But those companies in the end went out of business or they consolidated or labor costs, uh, which got so high, they shipped their manufacturing component overseas someplace. And the U.S. government, in their wisdom, and various promoted the global economy. We would all benefit from a global economy. Well, all that did was it made all that cheap Chinese labor available to American corporations. And it's not easy to set up a plant in China. All the rigmarole required and everything that you can't even imagine. But the labor costs there were so significantly less than they would have to pay an American that basically the government, with their let's go global, would all be good for us. And it has been because it's kept prices on various things lower than they would have been probably if they'd been manufactured in the United States. But nonetheless, what happened was it gutted the lower or semi-skilled set required in manufacturing. We don't make coat hangers in the United States anymore. We don't make lots of stuff in the United States anymore. There were small companies, maybe employed 200, 300 people out scattered hither and yon in every state in the United States. Sometimes they were the center employer for a particular uh, town, and they could not, using the labor source they had there and other forces, they just could not compete using American labor. So they either went out, they weren't capable of setting up in Japan, so they went out of business. The bigger corporations who had used offshore labor or, and it's coming, automation, were still able to compete And so automation, here's the problem again. As I said, companies will hire on the lowest wages they can for the skill sets required to do the job that they need doing. Recently went into a Wawa, which is a gas station and quickie mart throughout the area here and maybe throughout the country. I don't know, but it's similar to other large nationwide gasoline and quick mart places. And it's a pretty nice. The quick mart's pretty nice. It's got a lot of stuff. Anyway, last time I was in there, they have now switched over to self checkout. They have one clerk, and there are like 10 self checkout stations. With the movement to using credit card and debit cards, dealing with cash and having to exchange cash has been reduced. So labor costs for Wawa, uh, they said, well, I buy this machine for quick checkout and it can replace all these people. So we'll do one clerk, we'll pay one labor charge, and all the rest is self checkout. And that is what's happening at the low skill set end of the American labor force. It's being replaced by automation. And there are various factors for that, but the underlying factor is that company is in the business for profit, and labor is part of its cost structure, and they have to do whatever they can have to do to keep themselves competitive in the market. They can't ship the gas station to China and use cheap labor there because they're supplying a service, and it's really a service here in the United States. They're not manufacturing anything, they're only providing services. Okay, in the marketplace, the free enterprise system that is America, it is not truly a free enterprise system. It is managed, regulated, and mandated by the federal and state governments. For example, we came up when we did Social Security. So if you work for a living, uh, I think it's 6% of your paycheck every month goes to the federal government in terms of Social Security. You don't get that money to spend. Your employer also has to pay 6%. Okay, uh, that raises the cost of the company's product or service because it's a labor-related expenses. The government mandated that companies of various size have to provide you some form of health care, and it varies from company to company. But that is an expense to that company and affects the cost of their end product or service. Okay, so when the government mandated healthcare services for companies over a certain size, and they started mandating minimum wages, all those things came to bear on for-profit companies in the United States. And the only way for them to be competitive in the world was to look how to reduce their labor costs. Labor costs are going up. Minimum wage went up. Social Security can go up at any time. They changed that rate. Uh, Taxes, corporate taxes can go up. All those things mandated by the federal government. EPA requirements, they mandate on manufacturing. It's part of the reason manufacturing went overseas is because of EPA. I talked to a Ford Motor Company guy. He was in the parts area. And I was curious. I asked him, all the parts that are made for Ford, are they made in the United States or in Mexico or Canada? And the answer was no. Some of them are so polluting in their manufacture. They're done in China or some other place, they don't care. Those jobs for the manufacturing of that product or service has gone away. There was people once upon a time who were employed doing that, but the EPA restrictions, and I'm okay with that. I'm just telling you what's impacting wages. and jobs, and where are those high paying jobs and how to get a high paying job, and the forces that are in play because jobs are going away and they will continue to go away, especially when you have a low skill set. And that's what's happening at the low end. That's why, between taxes, Social Security, sales taxes, mandated health care, mandated minimum wage, all these sorts of things, Congress does not understand the free market system, or they do, but they don't care about you having low skill sets. If you're a high school graduate only, they they're making no provision for you other than, well, we're going to raise your minimum wage. That's it. Well, what happens when they raise the minimum wage? The company that you work for, unless you work for a government entity, the company you work for, or the service provider, or the manufacturer, whatever, they have to take that into account, and they have to potentially raise their costs of their product and service. And if they don't automate your job, and everybody in that particular manufacturing sector or service says, look, we just, given the cost of our raw materials and our electricity bills going up and so on and so on and so on, we just have to raise prices. Okay. So you got to raise minimum wage. But what happened? The stuff you buy costs more. Are you getting ahead? No. It the government, they don't understand. They think all companies are nonprofits. Even nonprofits have to raise the price of their product or service or try to get more money because everything they do costs them money, and to provide a nonprofit service like there are nonprofit hospitals, they have to raise uh, what they charge for a particular service, a surgery, a doctor visit. They have to do that. Uh, that is somewhat controlled. Medicaid sets the prices that they're willing to pay, and Medicare, defined by the government again, sets the prices. So you get into a tough situation if you're a nonprofit because you know, it's dictated to you. And if you have no room to go, then what are you going to do? And nonprofits can go out of business as well. They just can't provide the goods or services for which the government or some other entity like an insurance company is paying for to provide that services. High paying jobs, high skill sets, manipulation and mandated by the federal government, various regulations, corporate taxes, uh, mandated health care, mandated minimum wage. Okay, so where does that leave you and me? Okay, higher prices on things, and we have gutted in the United States the small manufacturing companies or even the mid-sized companies that used to employ a lot of American workers. We used to make air conditioning units, refrigerators in the United States, washer dryers. We made all those things here. They required all sorts of different skill sets. But the globalization, globalization is good. We'll all benefit, i.e., you can move your plant to China or the Philippines or India or someplace else and wind up with a lower cost in product cost or a service than would otherwise be the case if it were made in the United States. A very dumb move. Yes, we all benefited. We can all buy T-shirts made in China for $5 or something, and yeah, it would probably cost more if it was made in the United States because it'd be made by American workers. We didn't care. The government didn't care. It'd be good for us all, and we have probably all benefited if you had a job. it. Okay, round and round and round. What am I trying to get to on this? Their labor costs. If you're in a union, you have some bargaining power. And getting into a union and getting a skill set is absolutely the way to go. A trade, electricians, plumbers, HVAC people, auto tech mechanics, computers, if you learn how to do computers. The higher the level skill set, the fewer people available
I'm
to
having
fill
trouble
that
hearing.
job,
Can you
the
say that
higher
again?
wage you're going to get. In fact, once upon a time, buggy whip makers was a highly skilled job to manufacture a buggy whip. And so, buggy whips could cost a bunch of money, and they were high-end buggy whips, and there were low-end buggy whips in cost. And the craftsmen, the really good craftsmen, like saddle makers and boot makers and all those things, they could charge really good money because they were craftsmen, and they were making probably a limited number of these things. And that's still the case in the United States. There are people who can make high-end products and demand a high-end price for the labor and services. But if you think about it, they're highly skilled people, okay? Maybe absolutely uniquely skilled, and they're going to command more money. So if you don't have a wide skill set, or I'm talking about the buggy whip guy, one time he was doing really good, but then buggies went away. So he only had one skill set, buggy whip making, and he was really, really good at it. Well, if he didn't adapt to the changing environment, if he didn't figure out how to use his skills in some other industry, some way, he had no job. So even if you have a skill set, you need to add to that skill set. And one of the ways that most people do that is they gradually accept more responsibility in their workplace, and they work their way into management. They, there are, I got interviewed for a job with Bethlehem Steel one time, and I would be in their executive management program. And what they did in this particular program is I would go to a particular plant and I would be assigned to a particular department for like 6 months. The mechanical engineering department or the electrical engineering department or the manufacturing management floor space. And I would learn various aspects of steel manufacturing. And then once I had done this massive apprentice program, I would be put in charge of some aspect of a particular steel mill because I now knew all various aspects of steel production. And they expected me to use my mind to work through problems that would be coming up that had not been dealt with before, or to enhance their product or service, reduce the product or service cost, do something like that. Use your mind in a way that was new and fresh to that industry. And that would command big bucks. If you're going to use your mind, they're going to have to pay you big bucks. If you're simply hands and eyes, that's your skill set. A lot of people can do that. If it involves what I eventually started calling knowledge workers, a lot of college educated people are knowledge workers. They know a whole lot about a specific area. Mechanical engineers are like that. They know about materials. They know how to design various things, new stuff. They command big dollars. Chemical engineers, they were one time the highest paid out, straight out of college, 100 grand. Chemical engineering because of the oil industry and plastics. Okay. But I'm talking to you guys that have high school graduates or less than high school, or perhaps a year or two of college. You have to add to your skill sets one way or the other, or you're going to get stuck and the industry is going to change or go away, or the company you work for is going to go out of business, or They're going to automate what you do. Tesla is if you look at a Tesla factory, that sucker is full of automation. They use less people to manufacture a car than Ford or Chrysler or any of those other people. And that's the way it's headed. Once upon a time, the car manufacturing companies in the United States, in total, I think they employed about 1 million people or some number like that. And they would produce 10 million cars a year. I think they're now down to about 600,000 or something like that number. And they produce 15 or 20 million cars a year because of automation. Automation is coming. You got to face that issue. Uh, I know you never thought about it. I'm just going to get a job, graduate high school and get a job. Those days are sort of gone. You got to have skill sets. I don't care what they are. You got to add skill set, and you need more than one. In fact, you need to keep adding them your whole life because industries change, the culture changes. We don't need beanbag chairs anymore. Beanbag. They don't make those in the United States anymore. Hula hoops. Uh, is it all kind of stuff? The world is changing. Like they used to manufacture telephones that hung on your wall. They don't do that anymore. There's no factories. I don't even know if they make them anywhere in the world anymore, but they don't do that anymore. There are new things coming up that will require labor and mind use and new skill sets, and you should orient yourself around that. Of course, there are government jobs, and those in small localities, sometimes the government job is only that's the best job you can get. Working for the Postal Service or working for EPA or Agriculture Department, something like that. There are federal agencies and various organizations in literally every county of the United States. Now, they don't hire very often, but maybe if you got acquainted with them and what they do, it might line up with an interest you have naturally, like you like the outdoors and you like planting and agriculture, those sorts of things. It may line up and you may be able to work yourself in there. Your interest, whatever your interest you're most interested in, and what you do on your free time should highlight out what your strongest interests are, and whatever they are in a roundabout way, you do them the easiest, you do them probably the best you can, and that is a skill in itself. Work ethic is sadly degrading in the United States. Wanting to do a job as best as you can. Work ethic can get you. If I'm going to hire unskilled labor, I'm going to be looking for strong work ethic. I will take you over a person who doesn't exhibit any kind of real work ethic that are even going to show up on a regular basis. And that is a problem for a lot of low-end, unskilled labor companies is they have a tremendous, I don't know the proper term, rollover. People work a couple weeks and then they disappear. That's an issue for them. How do you assess and hire people with a strong work ethic? Okay, I've gone on too long about this. It is not a free market system. The government, by mandated or minimum wage, they try to do what they can do, but they don't understand the far-reaching impacts and aspects of whatever they mandate or whatever they do. And they don't, have a problem with manufacturing shutting down here and going overseas. And that's a bad thing. I think eventually one of the aspects of looking in the future is that if energy costs get very, very high, okay, companies and so on will have to start thinking about reestablishing manufacturing in the United States. One of the aspects of shipping it, doing everything in China was that transporting everything over there and raw materials and then transporting the manufactured good back here was cheap enough they didn't care. It wasn't a significant cost increase for them. If energy gets really high and transportation costs get really high, stuff will more likely have to be made here in small businesses, small manufacturing plants, or large manufacturing plants. That is the future trend. If gasoline is $22 a gallon, businesses are going to have to form up around the smaller communities. You can't drive 100 miles to buy furniture. It's going to have to be closer to you. So things are going to start collapsing back on smaller gasoline-powered footprints or diesel-powered or electric. But anyway, there are changes that are coming, and you looking to view the future and getting a high-paying job need to consider these things and set yourself up with skill sets and keep adding skill sets and learning new skill sets so you can jive and move with the market, with the working for the man or yourself. Anyway, enough for today. This had to do with wages, how companies think about wages, deal with wages, what you got to do to get a high paying job, how the government impacts uh, the labor market, particularly, how they do not do much to really help the low end or unskilled labor market. There's another aspect of the labor market that the government does. There is, I call it welfare, but it's got a different name now. And if you're not employed, and you can get, in fact, there's unemployment benefits for which you also are paying, and your company is also paying for. Mandated add-on costs to the product or service. But welfare, they can get a certain amount of subsistence assistance each month, and it's not a whole lot, but unfortunately, it puts the people in a kind of position they either take the welfare money, or if they go out looking for a job, their skill sets are so limited they can only get minimum wages or whatever, and they're better off just taking the welfare as opposed to taking the minimum wage job or even a non-minimum wage job, because if you make too much money, you don't qualify for Medicaid anymore, you don't qualify for SNAP benefits or food benefits, and you don't qualify for assistance, income assistance. It's a government put all those programs in place to help, but now it's impacted the labor market at the low end where there are fewer workers to take these unskilled job sets, and work ethic has degraded. So what are companies doing? They're just automating the jobs. They're not hiring people. They're going to be using computer-driven, AI-driven machinery. Anyway, it's a complex mess. Get a skill set. Add to your skill set. Seek out what do you have to do to get a high-paying job. Sometimes you have to move. You got to do what you got to do. Don't accept that you're stuck. There's nothing you can do. It's never the case. There's always something you can do. Takes effort. Nothing is free. That's the way the world works. Enough of this one. I'm sorry, but anyway, I think it's the 31st of March in 2023. Bye-bye for now.